welcome in here on Unemployed with Mike Schaefer. I am Mike Schaefer. I am joined, as always, on Mondays with Kaleb Henry of HuskerMax. Kaleb, it was an eventful weekend. I mean, I feel like we're in that weird spot where there's so much going on from a Nebraska athletics standpoint. And it's weird now with spring football having just started a little bit earlier. You get this now where you're getting basketball and baseball and softball, and now you have like spring football thrown into the mix. Sometimes you get it in like November where you're getting the kind of the end of football, the beginning of basketball. You have some other stuff maybe going on in there with volleyball and everything else. But this is kind of got to be a busy time for you with running things over there with HuskerMax.
Yeah, the busiest time, no contest, is late October through November as you're going through all the stuff there. And then if you get a bowl game and you got a run in the postseason for volleyball, of course. Right now, though, it's just the sheer number of games to follow. And I'm really happy that we've got Marin Angus Combs does all of our softball stuff. And then I do a lot of our baseball, but Nick Handley is doing some quick kernels for us with the I-80 Club. And then you add on, oh, yeah, there's still women's basketball and men's basketball. And thank God there's not another portal, but you're getting an earlier start in football. And maybe some of that is, one, yes, stupid busy, but maybe some of that is contributing to because it was already there, but like the apathy of getting back to football.
Yeah.
This is a very zero hype. Nobody is yelling, let's get hype. There's zero hype. you get into you would
Is there
hear,
a market for that?
There might be. You would hear football guys at the basketball games in the media room, and they're like, do we have to start football? Because like they're having fun with the basketball. And
Sure.
for a lot of the people who are more pure basketball, they're like, yes, let this never end, never get to the other thing. But guess what? Whether you're purely football guy, purely basketball guy, or like most of us, somewhere in between, I'm sorry, football is going to pay some bills too while we get to enjoy basketball. And I think that's the tough part, is that so many of us are really wrapped up for what we do in our jobs, wrapped up in the run and the magic of Nebrasketball, and we're getting excited. We're less than 3 weeks out from Selection Sunday, and knowing where like that first weekend's going to be. And some of us with I-80, we're going to be there that weekend with the road show. But like football has started, and we had a press conference. We'll have 2 more this week. Like we still have to do these things too as part of the job, with where we are, as opposed to maybe some of the bigger publications that split it up completely, where this person's doing football, this person's doing basketball. We're still all over the place, but basketball continues to chug along, Schaefer.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely chugging along. It chugged right through Penn State, which offered very little resistance on Saturday. I knew they weren't going to be very good. I felt like there wasn't going to be a lot to learn from the Penn State and the Maryland games. Maryland, Nebraska plays on Wednesday. They get through that, and they've effectively, I think I can say this and it not being an overstatement. At that point, Nebraska would have handled its schedule and its business about as well as any team could have done. You wouldn't have like what you would consider to be a bad loss. Now, you drop a game out at USC, or you drop to UCLA, or a home loss to Iowa, and you get swept by Iowa. They don't feel good, but those are all tournament teams. Those are all teams that are playing, in the NCAA tournament in March, or in the play-in round, if you would. And so just getting by Maryland on Wednesday, they'll have completed something that's a bugaboo for teams throughout the country. I mean, Kansas just lost by double digits to Cincinnati. Now, that's a Cincinnati team that's 7-7 and maybe the best conference of basketball that's out there. And so they might be a fringe bubble team at that. But it's hard to always win the games you're expected to win. I mean, Minnesota beat Michigan State earlier this year. We've seen other teams drop games randomly to, an Oregon team that looks terrible, or even this Penn State team has beaten some people that, it has happened. But I think that is important to note. As much as I'm just kind of like, yeah, let's just get through this because I want to get back to playing teams where I can figure out how I actually feel about things right now. It should be noted that just taking care of business does really matter.
Yeah, it does. And you're looking at I know Josh Peterson loves the door A and door B conversation, but no matter what door it would
Man
be,
loves doors.
yeah, he's a big door guy. If you got to this point in the season, you said 23-4, and you wouldn't care what the 4 was, you'd absolutely take that. Now, those 4, even though I was a depressed kind of a-hole on the Nebrasketball hour after the game, because I'm still not convinced anything about the year 1 Ben McCollum Iowa team. Nebraska still went in there and lost, but all 4 of those are quad 1 losses.
Right.
Like in the other 3 are preseason 1 Purdue, national title favorite Michigan, and then you split with an Illinois team that when they're playing their best are easily Final Four, if not national title game type of a team. Granted, they don't play like that every night out, like we saw with UCLA, especially second half and late. But still, those losses, you look at them and you're like, yeah, those are maybe other than Iowa, those are all easily second weekend teams, and then you ride it from there.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of wild. You look back at that Illinois game, you know how their season sort of played out. They lost a tough one against UCLA with a coast-to-coast layup in overtime to seal the deal for the Bruins. But you look at that Illinois game, and it's like the further we get away from that, the more I kind of wonder, Caleb, if Nebraska didn't see the very best version that Illinois could offer for about 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think kind of similar at times with that Purdue game. You know, like maybe there's a better version of Purdue in there, but Nebraska took some heavy punches from those teams and then was able to return fire in their own way. And then the Illinois game got a little away from them at the end. And so that was less competitive. But then I'm trying to think of it. Is the Nebraska-Illinois game the opposite of this? Or is it Nebraska-Wisconsin? Like what would you consider to be the best 20 minutes of Nebraska basketball this year? Like from a half perspective, you can't middle it out. You can't take 10
right.
from one side and 10 from the other.
No, you take your middle 20. No, I was going to say kind of the opposite of that, to where you were looking at, you definitely got maybe Illinois' best shot. You actually had Purdue playing like a preseason number 1. Michigan seems to kind of be doing that anyway, even though let's just take Jamarcus Lawrence's first half in that one. But you also didn't get maybe the hottest Wisconsin has played all year.
Right.
Like you went and you just rolled Wisconsin. You hammered Creighton a couple of days before that. And yes, the Blue Jays just got smoked by St. John's, but they also went to UConn and won. So like there's sparks coming from these teams that you destroyed. And hopefully you're looking at, okay, you didn't peak, and then everyone else was kind of on the come up when you got to them. So Nebraska has had both the taking the top punch and being the top puncher. I would say probably the Wisconsin game.
Yeah.
The Wisconsin game stands out because you had just had the win over Creighton, and then you were starting to go, okay, is this for real? What does it look like? Because Creighton had a few losses up to that point. Now you're going into Big Ten play. So probably the most impressive half was probably that first half to jump all over Wisconsin, right?
Certainly in terms of teams that you beat, the most impressive, because, you know, they had great 20-minute stretch against Oregon. Their second half against Minnesota might have been as good as anything they've done, you know, all year. But those aren't the same opponents as like what Purdue did to Nebraska in the first 20 minutes of that game, or what Illinois did to Nebraska in the last 20 minutes of that game.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about like the top teams that Nebraska played, and so some of that to say, Caleb, like there's still an element out there, and maybe we never see it, but I still think there's like something better for this group to achieve in terms of like its best 20 against another really good team, even though they haven't maybe played at the level that's been their highest as of late. So I guess there's a part of me that's wondering if we're ever going to get to see that, or if maybe we already have and you're just looking back on it. And like you said, it's definitely Wisconsin, or maybe the the first like 17 minutes of that Illinois game. The way they finished to the first half is kind of what removes that a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And there's got to be a point where you're looking at the ceiling for the team and go, okay, what can be ridiculous? And you haven't had that from Rinkmast. And it doesn't have to be he has a 20-point half, but if he hits 2 or 3 threes in a half, on top of you get 1 or 2 from Jamarcus Lawrence, and you get 3 or 4 from Price Sanford, and you get 3 or 4 from Braden Frager, and you get 1 from Hoiberg, and you go down the list and you're like, okay, well, that's double-digit threes in the first half, which is something Nebraska has done. But if you space it out across the board like that, and obviously you got to take care of things defensively, and maybe you're getting into the paint in a different way than you did, especially against Illinois, even Purdue. That's the part where it can feel like, oh, the lid's going to come off. Like the ceiling, you're blowing straight through it. As Michael Jordan would say, the ceiling is the roof. Like you go up and you're hitting it. And what I'm hopeful for is Nebraska gets a chance to do that in the tournament, and like it all comes together against a good team.
Yeah.
Granted, like if you do it in the first game and you're playing an AQ team out of pick your mid-major, low-major conference. Yeah, whatever. You go in there and you whoop up on someone, and it's like you won 97-58. Okay, cool. You got that first tournament win. Please come out and shoot like that and play like that against a team that's good. Because here's the thing. What did we see over the last month or so as you saw Purdue and Illinois and Michigan and Iowa especially just holding on to everyone and daring the officials to call it? Penn State, on the other hand, one, I don't think they are good enough on a floor to hold somebody and stop them from getting the ball.
They tried.
I don't think they tried. I don't think they even wanted to. A little bit.
They got called for it at least.
Yeah, I still don't think they were trying. They had zero want to on being on that basketball floor the other day.
Their defensive rebounding was so bad. And it's like hard because I don't want to take away, because Nebraska, I felt like, showed up with a lot of energy to start that game.
Yeah, Nebraska played well. Yes.
And Frager especially jumped out to me in the first half, because even though he wasn't maybe affecting things how he wanted entirely, just going and getting those offensive boards was just kind of a different, like, I don't want to pick on him in general, because I think he's kind of a key to this whole thing going to another level if they can get there. It's when he's at his best, like there's just this energy about him at all times. And I felt like we saw that more against Penn State than we did against Iowa. Like it's in there against Iowa. He threw down the big dunk. You know, he had some moments where he was on sturts defensively that were good. He had some moments that were bad. He had some freshman moments throughout. But some of it is just like getting yourself into the game by just the straight hustle plays. And then everything else kind of comes to you. Because then we saw the shooting a little bit later. And again, it's Penn State. But I thought it was meaningful that we got a good Braden Frager game for the first time since really Illinois.
Yeah, and this was only the second game of the year that you didn't have Berke. He was out with illness, throwing up before the game. But yeah, it's not great.
My son did that after the game in his car seat, which is always the most fun.
I think Popcorn Kid probably threw up a dozen times that night.
Yeah, that was gross.
Like, can we just real quick before getting to Frager?
Is this part of free advice? Do you want to save this for free advice?
Remind me at free advice.
I will remind you at free advice.
I was just sitting there as a dad, like, come on. But back to Braden, and I think Fred had said it earlier in the week that maybe he just didn't trust his ankle enough, even though he had rehabbed, he was back. He just wasn't trusting it. That was something we wanted more against Iowa, was get someone on your hip, get into the paint, especially during those times where the scoring had completely disappeared. He did have that dunk, and then Nebraska did really nothing for the next 11, 12 minutes of the game. But seeing that from him getting some scoring going, getting his shooting back, that felt really good, especially the rebounding, him flying down the lane, like you said. What also stood out to me, even though it wasn't the scoring and the 10 assists or 10 in double-double, triple-double territory, but going with no turnovers from Rink Mast felt significant for the way he's seeing the floor, because he's gone a while where it hasn't just been the shooting that's been kind of an issue. It's been he's clearly just trying to force the ball through defenders, and then he's been racking up the turnovers over the last month. It was nice to see him not force it that way against Penn State and end the game not just with more assists than turnovers, but 0 turnovers.
Yeah, I think that's important. I would have loved to have seen a little bit better from just Mast in general. I know that's such a weird, because it's not like he played poorly. It's not like anybody played poorly. It's just there's a certain way that it looks when Rink Mast is on, and I covet it because I think it unlocks the best version of what Nebraska basketball is. It's largely if they have a version of Rink Mast that forces teams to be out on the perimeter, that he can be dangerous with those mid-game hook shots that he can get to when he wants to, that he has the confidence that when you're dropping the ball into him, that he can handle it and either feed it to whoever needs to, or he can get it up for a quick 2. I mean, just little stuff like that. And I know it's in there. Just hasn't been quite as consistent with it. That Iowa game, it's hard for me to flush that. Like that was a game where it felt like he didn't need to score 20 points. But if he scores like 12, Nebraska's in so much of a better spot. Like if they can just go get some of those easier baskets and you're not just having to throw up threes and you don't go 5 of 24 or whatever it is. And maybe you don't lose that game 57, 52. So it's just, there's little things in there. Overall, though, I thought the other sort of interesting, maybe could be important, might mean nothing. Just getting Garcia and Leo Curtis some time without Berke, letting them get some run, letting them, build a little bit of belief in what they can do should you need them in the front court at some point, if there's, injury or if there's fouls or whatever it is. And then I continue to I don't think I'm the only one on this bandwagon. I really want Leo Curtis back in Lincoln next year, because I just want to see I think there's a really fascinating player inside there, and I think we're just scratching the surface of it. And so I don't know how it happens, because I think Rink Mast moves on, you're going to go get a big who can come in and play right away. But if Leo Curtis could be the backup and then turn into in year 3 be the starter, that's kind of like my dream scenario here, since I'm out here talking about what Nebraska basketball's roster could look like in 27-28.
Yeah, if Leo could give you 15 to 20 minutes a game off the bench next year,
yeah,
like you feel
maybe
really
not even that much, like just 12 to 15 or something. Because I mean, who knows what that front court looks like? Who knows who's all back? But
right,
man, there's something there.
If you go out and get effectively a Rink replacement, but you bring back Berke, and then you just put Leo as okay, I need you to get minutes at the 5. I need you to get minutes at the 4. Like, just put him out there, because you get another year of him in the weight room, another year of him in the system. Depending on the lineup and what the other team has out there, he probably can run at the 4 for you if you need him. So, yeah, 15 to 20 minutes, because then if he's getting that type of playing time next year and you have an injury or you have foul trouble, you're like, okay, we need 30 from you tonight. Like, you're able to do that with him. But you're right. The future looks really good with him. Even in spurts right now of can you get 5 minutes from him? Like the little bit, especially against Michigan, he looked good while he was out there. And you're probably going to get to a spot either in the Big Ten tournament or the NCAA tournament where Berke or Rink or both are in foul trouble. And what do? Well, it's probably going to be Leo and Jared Curtis. So you look at those guys, and Leo I like more on the offensive end because it just seems like he's got the potential to get bullied down low defensively, but he's just tall enough to kind of be a distraction on some of those shots. Curtis, on the other hand, is kind of that bully, big body, not get run over defensively, but I do not want him touching the ball on offense unless it's an offensive rebound by the rim and he's just going right back up, because he is a turnover machine. but he can defend and grab rebounds really well, Dennis Rodman style. There's got to be some part in there where it's, hey, while you're on the floor, we need you to do this. Don't try to be anyone else. You're out here to burn some minutes and not let things fall apart. If he can do that, I think he can be really productive in a 5 to 10 minute role, depending on how games are going in the tournament.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, all of it. And there's a part of it where it's like, that Fred wants to have the condensed lineup, but you do wonder if there wouldn't have been some value in getting these guys a little bit more minutes when it was tighter or closer in some of those games against Ohio State or Indiana or whatever it was. But it's also hard to argue with it. And here's the other thing. Nebraska has won so many games this year by double-digit points where guys are getting to play more than they would have otherwise, that it's, you have the other side of it where it's like you're getting like legitimate Leo Curtis and Garcia run against Washington, maybe not so much in that one, Oregon, every time they took on Northwestern this year, the games against Wisconsin early or Creighton or whomever. So it's, there is that element to it too, where they have probably actually gotten more time than what you would expect, given Nebraska's ability to either just win games by double digits or lose slightly. I mean, that's just kind of where this team sort of sits at. I think your breakdown there of those guys is absolutely spot on. All right. So one of the things I wanted to discuss here basketball wise, and we're going to get into some football here towards the end of the show, but one of the things I wanted to get to here basketball wise, the committee revealed their top 16 seeds for the NCAA tournament. I assume you saw this on Saturday. I assume you wrote about it.
I did.
Was there anything in there? Nebraska comes in as number 3 in the South region. The other teams include Iowa State, UConn, and Texas Tech. Honestly, Caleb, if I could just sign up for this right now, I think I would. Nothing about a matchup with UConn in the Sweet 16 would scare me. And the idea here is that 3 seed Nebraska could very well be playing in Oklahoma City, particularly with Kansas losing to Cincinnati.
Yeah, and we've got the I-80 Club cheering guide out right now, and you've got Houston, Kansas coming up tonight. So try to knock down Kansas a little bit more. For things that were surprising, maybe Florida. Florida sitting there as the top 3 seed. They're going to mess around and end up being one of the higher 2 seeds out of a bad SEC. So you've got that. So that part's a little bit surprising, but you're right. If you look at this and you're like, you take Nebraska, you just say 3 seed, and then you name the teams that would be in there as the top 4. You're like, yes, you take that. That seems like a good path to the second weekend. You wouldn't even know what happens the first weekend. But when you get there, you're like, okay, this feels good against UConn. And then Iowa State or Texas Tech, and you're not necessarily looking at either of those teams as juggernauts that you can't play with. So you sign up for that. However, the way it is slotted out is that you would not be in St. Louis or Oklahoma City. You would be headed to the East Coast. So like there's that balance on it. Is yes, you'd take that for the matchups. There is a little bit of a benefit if you can get to Oklahoma City, which right now, if you took the results leading up to today, or Nebraska falls out of the top 10 in the AP poll, but in wins above bubble is up to number 8. So you're on the 2-3 line. That would put you at one of these closer sites to where you would have 75-80% plus of the arena in red. And I think when you get to those neutral courts, Nebraska has dominated the neutral court games this year and in the past as well, because you've been in Sioux Falls and Kansas City. But if you can get that in OKC, I think that becomes a huge boost for you trying to, 1, get that first tournament win, but 2, get to the second weekend and start playing with house money.
Yeah, and so much of it is just going to be what happens with Kansas down the stretch. Some of these teams, like I have a hard time seeing Purdue staying on that 2 line. They still have games against Michigan State, Wisconsin, and they've got challenges there. I don't know what's going to happen for even a Michigan State. Like, are they going to stay at a 4? because they've got 3 games that are difficult as well. And then
Illinois.
we mentioned Illinois. They lost to UCLA. That probably slides them down a little bit. Florida is a big benefactor here. I mean, they don't have a win against a top 20 team, though I don't know if that's changed now that I'm guessing Alabama moved up because they sort of have to. But they kind of take advantage of it. Virginia is another one of these teams where it's like, you could tell me Virginia and Vanderbilt are the 15th and 16th best teams in the country. I think it's because there's nobody else that really sort of deserves to go there, if that makes sense. Like you could put North Carolina there and then they lose. You could put, one of those other SEC teams there and then they lose. I mean, Vanderbilt already lost again this past weekend. They have, since starting undefeated, or one of the 4 undefeated teams along with Nebraska and Miami of Ohio and Arizona, they've kind of cooled off significantly. And so part of it is, Kaleb, I think Nebraska has a chance to maybe get to a 2. More likely seems like they're at a 3, but I also don't think they're in danger of falling out of being a 4, even if they were to go 2-2 down this stretch. I just think they're in a very safe 3 spot to me right now with the mobility to move up and the unlikeliness that they would end up moving down. But if they did, it would only be about 1 line. They have too many quality wins. Too many. They have a lot of quality wins, and I think that bolsters them relative to some of these other teams.
Yeah. By the way, Alabama did move into the top 20 up to 17 in the AP. Yeah. But yes, it's because the way the schedule lays out, Nebraska has a really favorable last stretch here.
They just got to make it matter.
Yeah, like Nebraska's got to take care of business, but also all the other teams that you're looking at, okay, where are the other Big Ten teams at? Where's Kansas at? What is can somebody mess up Florida a little bit? Probably not, but like you start to look at where everyone else is that's around Nebraska from that reveal, and they all play each other outside of Florida. Like all of these other teams still have to play each other or play really, really big games, and Nebraska just doesn't. So the Huskers get to just go take care of business and let the other teams beat each other up, and you can either just move up the 3 line or find yourself up on the 2, which would be really crazy when you start to look at, yes, the host site, but okay, if you're the 2, is there where are you at with those 3s then? Who fell to a 3 or who moved up to a 3? It starts to make that path look a little bit different. Although, to be honest, whether you're a 2 or a 3, it's not going to make much difference because you'll face the other seed when you get to the Sweet 16. Absolutely. But still, it does matter because Nebraska's never been a 2. Like you can go through and just start naming all the historical stuff, and you're like, Nebraska hasn't been a 2. That's something for you to go chase. So we're out of the conversation on a 1, but just go. Can you take care of business, win out right now, which would give you, I think both of those wins in LA would be good, and then getting one back on Iowa would just feel good for you as in momentum, but also that's a tournament team who's right now trying to fight their way. Like can they be just on the outside of those top 16? That's where Iowa's trying to put themselves, although a loss to Wisconsin didn't help them the other day. But it might help Nebraska on where some of the net stuff ends up. So it's like there's a lot to play for the Huskers. And then you start to look at those teams in the Big Ten, especially that are around you, that you're fighting for seed lines with the NCAA tournament. You're also fighting for seed lines in the Big Ten tournament. Is it a double bye? Is it a triple bye? You're all kind of bunched up and chasing Michigan right now. So Nebraska continues to have the advantage in what the schedule is laying out, while everyone else still has to play each other and play really big games against top 10 or at least top 25 teams. And Nebraska just doesn't have those sitting ahead of it until you get to the Big Ten tournament.
Yep. And again, they only have 1 game where it's like would be considered a bad loss. And then 3 games where if you only drop one of those, no one's really going to blink much on it. I think the other big thing here is when we're talking about Kansas, they have these opportunities where they could lose 3 in a row with that Cincinnati game. Then you have Houston and Arizona. But even if they just split with Houston and Arizona, it's going to be considered such a big win that it will probably neutralize that loss. There's just so much, I feel like we're getting closer and we should have less questions on some of this stuff. But it just because of how backloaded some of these games are and what the schedule is, it looks difficult. Now, I will say, or difficult to project, is what I mean. I will say it does feel like Nebraska's chances of being a triple bye team feel really good given the way that Illinois dropped that game. So Illinois 13-4. They only have 3 left. Purdue has 4 left. They're 12-4. Nebraska's 12-4. Michigan State's 12-4. Wisconsin's 11-5. A bunch of these teams all play each other. I think Purdue still plays Michigan State. Purdue still plays Wisconsin. Michigan State still plays Michigan. Michigan still plays Illinois. I mean, so there's just a lot left in there for these teams to kind of sift through. Meanwhile, if Nebraska handles business, they could end up as the 2 in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Which is important because you want to, again, whether it's the 2 or the 3, you want to put yourself right now on the opposite side of Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's important, even though you played really well in the game. It's still important if you're trying to get to Selection Sunday, get to Big Ten Championship Sunday. Like you want to make your path a little bit easier. So if you can get up to at least the 3, but even the 2, not be the 4 seed, 4 or 5, the 5 seed. Man, that would you got a double bye, but you probably have not really easy, but an easier first game as the 5, and then you have to roll into a 4 seed who's maybe a little bit rested, but still get to the 2 or the 3 and get yourself on the opposite side of Michigan. And then who knows the way stuff plays out, because Illinois might be that 4 seed. And if you're looking at the 2 teams you probably don't want to see are Michigan, to me anyway, Michigan and Illinois, as early as possible. You want to try to save those for the championship game. Everyone else you'll take right now. And not to say that Nebraska wouldn't play well in a semifinal against Michigan or Illinois, but if you can keep those 2 on the other side of the bracket for as long as possible, you take that.
And it's also not to say they're definitely going to beat Purdue in a rematch or beat Michigan State again. It's just, I think they match up better with those. I think, the scariest looking teams in the Big Ten are still very much Michigan and Illinois. I mean, that's how, and to what degree that these games sort of matter, I don't know if they do. But again, I would love to see Nebraska win the Big Ten tournament just to take something extra out of what has already been a fantastic season. All right, let's do blind rankings. I've got an interesting one for Kaleb today, playing off of the idea that we're going to get into this a little bit after the blind rankings, discussing what it is we want to learn this spring, or what we think we could learn, or what we hope to learn. Who knows? We're not in control of what we're learning. We're just control of what we choose to hear and how they, we're not even in control of how they say it. But you get these position groups and you tell me 1 through 5, your interest level in when they come up, whether it's Matt Rule or the assistant coaches or a player from that group, as it relates to this spring and Nebraska's football season for 2026. That makes sense?
Yep, I got it.
All right, and we are going to start off with one where the former coach was burning some ears because he said the head coach doesn't sit in on special teams meetings. Where are you at? Do you want to hear more special teams talk this spring, or, is it towards the bottom of your 1 through 5?
So I had this noted in my 6 storylines going into the spring ball, the special teams, that there is a change. But my thing is that I put in there, we aren't going to see any of it. Like, they can talk about it, but even if there's an open practice or at the spring game, you're not going to actually see how the whole operation works, especially when it comes to punting, let alone with kicking or kickoff punt coverage. And to be honest, the only thing you're really worrying about with that group is, can you keep the Australians after this fall because of their connection with Eckler? And then you go into another transfer portal. Can you build enough of a rapport with those guys to keep them around? But for this spring, we're not going to get anything out of it. It's a 5, like the easiest 5 I may have ever set up before. The easy, even counting last week, this is the easiest 5 in any blind ranking.
So here's also why it's a 5. We already know who the specialists are.
There's not a competition.
Right. And so, I'm sometimes accused of always having things laying in wait in that 5th spot. So I decided I'm going to take the one that I would have ranked 5 and put it at 1, and that way nobody can say that to me anymore. So a lot of it for me, and this is also why I'm not, to the larger point, not overly like, oh no, how's Brett Maher and Nick Humphrey going to do? Because some of it is, I feel like they did a nice job rebounding after a rough period of, selecting their specialists. I think there's still a little bit of ways for Archie Wilson to go. I feel very comfortable if Kyle Cunanan is their kicker already for next year. And then I know nothing, absolutely nothing about Jack Wills, and I hope to learn nothing about Jack Wills because all he's going to do is have perfect snaps like Kevin Gallick. That's it. Mm-hmm. There obviously would love to know more about kick returns and the strategy and all of that. There's time for that. We don't need it this spring. So I think that's a very fair number 5.
We're not going to know anything about how so much of that operates until September.
Even then, I would imagine it's not like we're going to get a full behind the doors look at how it's going for Maher and Nick Humphrey. All right. Next position group. The one that somehow is always the best on the roster, even though statistically it never actually appears that way. I'm talking about the wide receivers.
It's a 4 for me. It's a 4, and
you're running backwards.
Some of it is actually due to Holgerson's comments the other day, in that he goes, I don't know what kind of offense we're going to run or what it's going to look like. Might not know until you get to fall camp. Didn't know what runs worked for Emmett Johnson. What did he say, till game 6 last year?
I don't know if I believe that, but
one, I don't believe it. 2, if we are supposed to believe it, that becomes its own issue and its own problem because what happened after game 6 is you had a worse winning percentage than you did through game 6. So maybe just keep going back and trying to figure stuff out instead of having it figured out. But like the wide receivers, it's more what I want to see from them or learn about them is what does the offense look like to utilize them? Like we know what we have in Ja'Cory Barney and Isaiah Hunter. And we've seen a lot of Quasi Gilmore coming in, and then you start to mix in hopefully a healthy Janirin Bonner. You go through on a lot of those things. There's just not a lot for me to learn from them because they've been around a few years. It's not you just brought in 3 true freshmen, 5 stars. Okay, we got to learn what are they going to look like here. We know what these guys look like. We know what this room looks like. What we don't know is how they'll be utilized. And for this spring, we're ultimately not going to know 100% what that looks like when you get to the games this fall.
Yeah, and for me, I think the thing I'm most interested in with the wide receivers isn't even the guys that I expect to be the starters. It's I want to see where Cortez Mills, Quinn Clark, Keelan Smith, I think Larry Miles is one of the more intriguing early enrollees. You might see him as a return man. He would kind of taking on the role that I think a Ja'Cory Barney had when he first arrived, where it wouldn't surprise me if people were pretty intrigued by him, at points during the season. So there's interest there, but it's certainly more built of, the younger guys and certainly not the ones that I think we have a pretty good understanding of the rest of that wide receiver room. All right. Are you ready for next position?
Yes, I've got 1 through 3 open.
What about Corey Brown and the defensive line?
Now, is it when we're talking defensive line, because now everything is split, does defensive line include D tackles and the edge rushers?
I don't have a reason to separate them out, so we're going to put that all together. So you're getting Corey Brown and Roy Manning.
Okay, yeah. For me, I think I'll put them at 2. I'll put them at 2 because you do have 2 new coaches, so I want to hear from them. I want to hear what Corey Brown and Roy Manning say, and especially from their time of working with the new DC, and what does that come in and look like here, but also what do those groups look like, because they've got some new faces too. So I'm interested to see for a group that has vastly underperformed, whether it's personnel or coaching or system, since you lost Ty and Nash. And even then, you were kind of super dependent on just those guys. and then hoping someone else had a play here or there, which because they had a bunch of attention, other guys were able to make plays. But yeah, that I'll have that at 2 right now.
Yeah, that's I think there's going to be a lot of people that want to know how to feel about this team based on what the defensive line conversation is. I really do. All right, the next one, and could be your number 1, could be your number 3. We'll see where you go with Anthony Colandrea, TJ Lateef, Daniel Kalen, and friends at quarterback.
I will go 3. If I thought there was going to be more of a competition for the 1 spot, that might move it up. I think it's Colandrea's to lose. And Lateef very likely ends up using a red shirt this fall, and they don't rotate him in as many games because you do have, like if you get into some of these blowout games, you don't have to roll out Lateef as your number 2. But with 4 games, you can save him until you get to some of those conference games and utilize him more there, and probably get Danny Kalen in for more of the mop-up duty if you're fortunate enough to be in that position. But it's going to be Colandrea. We've heard the coaches talk about it a little bit. It's intriguing that there's going to be a new quarterback, but it also comes back to the Holgorsen don't know exactly what the offense is going to look like. How are you going to start to utilize everyone's talents? That's the part that definitely drops it. So I feel comfortable with where these other rankings have fallen for this to be at number 3.
I think that's fair. How comfortable do you feel about the linebackers as your number 1?
I'm pretty good with that. I'm pretty good. I think if I was looking at the groups that were remaining, linebackers, then running backs, then secondary. In secondary, I probably would have wanted to move somewhere else, but linebackers or running backs, I would have had at number 1 with compared to these other ones.
Maybe offensive line, or because you already know what that picture largely is supposed to look like, it's less interesting.
Yeah, the offensive line, we largely know what it's supposed to look like, but you did bring in three potentially new starters. So you go back again to the Holgorsen, don't know what are these guys' strengths? How do you want to utilize them? How do you want to utilize 3 of your 5 new starting offensive linemen in their strengths, and Elijah Pritchett apparently being a completely new human, and you get Justin Evans back too, with a new quarterback, with no running back that has really proven themselves outside of 2 drives that are apparently weighing heavily into the way this coaching staff talks about the room, on top of wide receivers that you don't want to just have blocking anymore, and potentially getting a true freshman tight end as your can't keep him off of the field type of a guy on offense. So like the offensive line mixes into all of that, but I think there's so much. They're more of a veteran room, even though it's 3 new guys that are coming in. You kind of just know what you should expect out of them.
Yeah. This is so stupid, and it's the dumbest thing you can say when talking about anything related to Nebraska football. But I sort of just have in my mind what the offensive line is going to be, and I've already kind of decided it's going to be fine, and I don't need to spend any more mental capital on it.
Right.
So, again, things that you don't need to say out loud, things that haven't been true about Nebraska for a while, things that aren't really true about the transfer portal era for anybody with their offensive line. And yet I'm just going to let all of that sort of stand and ignore it and just say, I think they'll be fine. I'm not that interested in the line. I'm certainly interested at running back, but I left that off for a reason because I think that's a pretty obvious 1 or 2. I have been someone, Caleb, that, going back to the middle of last year to especially in November, especially when I'm standing there in the Rose Bowl and I'm watching that game, Nebraska's linebackers were not nearly good enough last year. It was very obvious in the last 3 games of the year. It is fascinating to me. You brought in Chambliss and you have Dexter Foster, and I think they think the world of Vincent Shavers. And I think they're excited about Dawson Merritt, but once again, he's unavailable for you in the spring, and I think that's unfortunate. I don't know where Christian Jones is on the development track if he's ready to go. They've got some other guys in there too, but that linebacker room, like if they can make a jump there, like if they're more athletic or a little bit more sudden or better at finishing or taking on blocks or whatever it has to be, I think that, not to the level that the defensive line, but I think that can have such a big effect for how we feel about Nebraska's defense. They can be a little bit better in space, if they can be a little bit more playmaking, if they can be a little bit more sure-handed in tackling. All of that would work a long way to feeling better about Nebraska football in general.
And you have the system change from
right. And so then, you know, what that looks like.
To 4 down linemen. And so what you're not asking the linebackers to do is, okay, you need a 4th guy up there. You're going to go be a stand-up edge. Well, and just be way underweight for the things you want to do. Now you have an actual edge position. Now you have those guys out there, the true defensive line guys that you can put across there. Can the linebackers, with one more guy in front of them, read the plays a little bit quicker to know what gap they need to, like, okay, I've got this gap. Okay, the play's going that way. What's my responsibility now? Can they make those decisions a little quicker? That's going to help with stopping just the absolute gushing and bleeding that happened in the run defense last year, because you didn't have as many guys up on the line. So the offensive linemen were able to start to get to your second level, get to your next block. And then the linebackers were just getting eaten up on that. They weren't able to shed a lot of those blocks either. You're right. If that side, with the new system, and I'm also very high on Vincent Schaefer. I think that's a guy who's going to be really, really good for Nebraska this year on top of the other guys you mentioned. If they can take a jump within that, that's going to be massive for this defense in stopping the run and then forcing more of those passing situations to where you hope Roy Manning can unleash those edge rushers in a pass rush. And then you get to the secondary, and you really liked your secondary numbers and your passing numbers last year, but so much of that ended up being because teams could just run on you all day. Even like you had good secondary players. You just didn't have to rely on them because other teams could do the other thing on offense. So I'm going to be interested to see if the defensive line and the linebackers operate the way they're supposed to within the system, the way we're being told that they should operate in the system. Ultimately, what does the secondary look like defending this a lot more when you have a decent pass rush and you're stopping the run a little bit better? And now you have 3rd and longs, and it's up to you, cornerback. It's up to you, safety. It's up to you, nickel. Like, wherever you guys are, now they have to do it, as opposed to, all right, if they pass it this 1 out of every 5 times there, every 5 plays, it's going to be easier to stop. What does it ultimately look like there? That's really intriguing to me, but a lot of it does rest on those linebackers.
Yeah, and it's going to be a heavy conversation just about sort of that defense, what it's going to look like, how they're going to play. You know, we're going to have that conversation or some form of that conversation, you know, probably a dozen times before Nebraska ever kicks it off in August.
Let me ask you this. Did you because we got to hear from the new defensive coordinator, Rob Orrick, the other day, and he got asked, how would you describe your defense? Like, were you as enthralled with just talk defense, just talk lingo to me more?
Yeah. So here's
like it wasn't nitty gritty, but it was just hearing him talk about it. I was like, I like the way you describe this.
Here's a window into the soul of someone who's covered Nebraska football for a long time. And I think this is true of a lot of the media members. I'd be curious if you would sort of say it's true of you as well, Kaleb. I think almost by and large, every defensive coordinator that I have covered, with maybe the exception of Bob Diaco because he exists on a planet unto himself. But even then, he was enthralling to listen to.
Yeah.
Defensive coordinators are almost always outstanding communicators. They're almost always more personable than their offensive counterparts. They're almost always someone who can blend the ability to talk to you in a technical football sense with the ability to make you understand what it is that they're trying to do or how they want to put an offensive player in the box or what it is that they want to attack. I have, whether it was Mark Banker, whether it was Carl Polini, John Papuchis, even Bob Diaco, for as weird as he was, like if you just had a conversation with Bob Diaco, chances are you would be pretty entertained because Who knows? But two, like the guy knows football at a really high level. Like defensive coordinators aren't necessarily there because they've reinvented the wheel. They're there because they have an ability to teach and to communicate and to talk in a way that very few of the other football coaches seem to have exactly the same. You think about how it is every time Phil Snow gets up and talks.
Yep.
Like one, he's got infectious energy, but two, that's a guy who's always been tasked with, well, I've got to teach it to my coaches, so I got to talk to them like this. And then I have to teach it to these sort of defensive players, and so I got to talk to them like this. And I got to teach it to these linebackers, and they have to be able to teach it to everybody else. So I've got to talk to them like this. Like I've never really like thought about it, but now I've settled on. And Eric Shenander was this. Like a lot of times your defensive coordinator has to be very, very good as a communicator. And that is why those guys almost always, Shenander, Tony White, even John Butler, like they're very good when they want to be. Now that's a big part of it. When they want to be at talking football in a way that scratches every itch you ever have when it comes to talking ball.
Now, you got to it, but the one that to me was way down that list of names on that communicating or being as enthralling as so many of those others was John Butler.
Yeah, and I think some of that was by design because he didn't want to talk as much. I thought he was a little bit more open when he was a defensive backs coach than when he was a defensive coordinator. So. There's just a lot that was happening there with just his tenure that I don't know that it's erased by any means, and we'll see how it goes with Rob Arch, because a lot of times you get that sort of, we talk about it with the head coach, but you can pick any coordinator and you can do the like, this is what they look like before they were the Nebraska coordinator, and this is what they look like on the day they cleaned out their office.
The presidential photos.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what it is. And so, Butler certainly wasn't Tony White, and he wasn't Mark Banker. But I just think about it, and it's like, it didn't matter who the head coach was. Almost always my favorite person on staff to connect with was a defensive coordinator. And I think it has to do with their ability to communicate, because I think it's such a massively important thing, almost more so with that than it is from the play design and concept of what you're doing, offensively, because the offensive coordinator is a lot of play design and grease board, and this is what we want to do here. But then they're sort of relying on their lieutenants on the offensive side to kind of, the quarterback coach is going to stress on this is what you're hitting on here. And the wide receiver coach is, these are the keys that you're working off of here. And so it's a little bit less of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think I've discovered this for myself at the same time that I was talking out loud about it. But it always comes back to the fact that very rarely are you going to have a defensive coordinator that can't communicate what it is that he wants to do and make you just feel like you're sitting in your high school football film room listening to your coach at that. Like, those were the best days of football for me in a lot of ways, of just like listening to coaches explain what it is that you're trying to do. And I love it now, even as, doing this in what some would argue is a professional capacity.
I'll give one caveat to this. Sometimes your personality, regardless of position, is so over the top that it makes you must listen. And that is Mario Verduzco. Back when we got position coaches regularly throughout the season, and it wasn't just the head coach and then coordinators and a few players, Verduzco was swamped with media because every time he talked was must listen. It was Charles Barkley as a football coach. Like that, every single time he opened his mouth, it's like, I got to get this. I have to listen. What are you talking about? You never
know when he was going to break news that nobody else was going to tell you either.
Exactly. He was just going to shoot from the hip, and it was like, all right, here we go. And
I love that, man. He was great. He was great to me.
He might have sunglasses on while you talk, whatever it was. Every time you got Verduzco, it was an appointment. It didn't matter kind of who else and whatever stations were going on. Oh, there's a player here. There's another assistant over here. It was Mario's right there. This is where we're all going with our recorders.
Yeah. I don't know that there's someone where it's opposite of this. I've had offensive line coaches where it's just been sort of impossible for me to connect. And I've had offensive line coaches where, like John Garrison couldn't be easier. Like it's just, could not have been an easier conversation, answer any question you have, that sort of thing. And then you also have Barney Cotton where it's like, you don't ask this in a certain way, you're going to get a prickly kind of response from it. So you've got to work on that. And then, Donovan Raiola would never really describe him as a communicator, but then you talk to his players and they love the guy. So it's, it's always different when you're wearing the media hat, no matter what. All right, let's finish up with some free advice. I don't have much today, I'll admit, but I do have this one. If your sports ethos is built around the idea of, quiet, almost stoicism, workman-like manner and attitude, not being worried about things that you can't control, it seems kind of wild that the media that covers it, particularly those up in Canada, would spend so much time crying about a version of overtime that both sides have to play. I don't know if you noticed this, Caleb, but when it's 3 versus 3, both of them have to have 3. So just because one of them happened to score on less shots on goal and didn't blow multiple opportunities in the third period doesn't lessen a gold medal win. Suck it, Canada.
I think just general free advice. Suck it, Canada. You're right, though. Whenever you have those conversations, and I know we have them here, I've had them on Nebrasketball Hour, and you start talking about things that become the adversity. Well, the other team is going through some of those things too. And when you're talking sheer numbers of guys on the ice, it wasn't like one team had 5 and you had 3.
No, that's
when
the way that it comes across.
Hey, well, you took this guy and this guy off the ice. Okay. The United States team lost 2 guys off the ice too. They took advantage, and you agreed to those rules going into the Olympics. If you had complained about it for the entirety of your time in Italy, to me, that would be one thing. And you got there and you're like, see, we told you we wouldn't have liked how this ending went, even if we won. Fine. At least to me, that has some legs to stand on. Instead, now you're sour because you're America's hat and you lost. That's all it comes down to.
It's really what it comes down to. And again, it flies in the face of how, we talk about hockey players and everything else. And then just some really salty media up there in Canada, some hilarious tweets, and the responses are even better. It's quite amazing. And it's easy for me to be flippant about it because it's not like my life revolves around the sport or anything else. But every so many years when the U.S. trots out their hockey team, I'm always locked in on it. It's always
absolutely
great. It's a terrific moment.
Canada's got a bunch of cheating curling players too.
You're a big curling guy, right?
My wife. So I was explaining because the Olympics are over, and I was watching the closing ceremony yesterday. I told my wife, I was like, I'm kind of upset, kind of sad that this is over because I really got into the figure skating. I enjoyed the hell out of the gala that they had. Where they all come out and they're a little bit more free spirited, and there's not one guy was in a panda costume. One of the pairs came out and did Mortal Kombat. Someone skated to K-pop Demon Hunters. Like it was fun. I got really into that, into obviously like skeleton and bobsled, and those types of things. And you go through the hockey and the biathlon. Hey, you've skied for a while. Here's a gun. They came up with a new way to ski. So you sprint up a mountain and ski down. Now this is your first time with Skimo. Like all of these are really fun. And then my wife just goes, you didn't mention curling once. You have curling on all the time. I was like, yeah, that kind of just becomes I have Gold Zone on. And for whatever reason, for the last 2 weeks in a row, at any time, I don't know when they were sleeping or if they were sleeping in rotations, but there was curling on every single day, every single hour, morning, noon, and night, and it didn't matter what time zone you were in, curling was on. So yeah, curling was fun. It's one of those where you watch it and go, that feels the most accessible for a lot of us past our athletic prime, even though when you get out there, it's much tougher than it obviously looks. So many of these things are much tougher than they look, but that's the one that feels the most accessible.
Important point here in the comments. Canada did once have 5 players versus the United States 3. Still didn't score. Suck it, Canada. All right. Last bit of free advice from me here. If you happen to be an offensive coordinator and you were brought in to help get a team's offense rolling and you managed to really not accomplish that in your first full season, if you were asked in the press conference as you're about to go into spring, I would probably have had a stock answer of what I learned from the previous year. I would not say I didn't learn anything and sort of be, I don't want to say jerkish, but I was relatively unimpressed by Dana Holgerson's answers on just about everything. And maybe he feels a little bit of heat from everyone after what was, to me, a pretty pathetic showing for Nebraska's offense last year.
Would you say that feeling of being unimpressed is you, or is the fans, or is it you?
All of it. It's all of it.
Well, that was his response to the running back question.
Yeah.
Is it the fans or is it you guys?
I just, like, what are we doing? You know, I don't know. Whatever. Dana Holgerson's going to do Dana Holgerson stuff. He was worshipped for an entire year and managed to put out an offense that scored 22 points a game against Power 4 competition. Congratulations. Now you're dealing with people that don't want to know or want answers or want to know what you're going to do, and you're going to be a petulant child about it. Fine.
On the opposite side of that, and we know he's good at typically answering questions, but I was happy with Matt Rule's answer to I asked him about did he have enough money to do what he wanted in the transfer portal, and you can read it was effectively a political no, but he gave a good answer to it.
He did a nice job with it.
Like he didn't avoid it outright, and there's always there could have been an opportunity to just avoid it outright and be like, how much money do you think we have? Like, you could have been combative with it. He didn't. So I was happy with him being as forthright as you can when the dollars are not publicly known. My last free advice, hey, mom and dad, it can be fun at Nebraska basketball games. And then when your kid gets on the jumbo screen, even better. And you start to have a bit going. They're on the jumbo screen. Everyone cheers because they're eating their popcorn. It goes away. Everyone boos. It goes back to your kid. Everyone cheers. You don't have to let that bit go on forever. And especially when you go and buy another bucket of popcorn, at some point you can step in as mom or dad, let everyone boo you and say, we're not doing this anymore. You can do that, because I guarantee that kid did not feel great after that. And you have to deal with that. As a parent sitting there watching that, I was like, ugh, I wouldn't have let my daughter do that. That's way more than they need, even if it's just for the fun bit within Pinnacle Bank Arena.
Yeah, I took my son to his first game for basketball. My wife and I were both there. He had an absolute blast. He loved it. He was super stoked about watching every Bryce Sanford three. The guy next to us was very, very into it until the end because he had the overs. And the way he reacted on the Kendall Blue three was probably a bigger celebration than Kendall or his family would have had himself. And my son was just like riveted by the guy next to us and how, like, everything that was happening, he was cheering and being excited. And so then Hudson was trying to match that energy. And we have this great moment, and my wife drove us, and so she's driving us back to Omaha, and I'm tasked with putting together the Instagram post, and you have this wonderful family moment. And we're pulling into our neighborhood, and we're at the stop sign, and we're about 2 minutes away from our house. And you hear that noise that emanates from the back seat that is just, parents know it. They know what that noise is. They know what it means, and they know what follows. And when you are in a car, there is nothing more helpless than the sound that your child is starting to upchuck than that. And so for whatever reason, I don't know if it was car sickness, he gets it out of him, and then he's just full of energy running around completely fine immediately after this. But he took this amazing Norman Rockwell moment minutes after I post the on Instagram and make myself look like the father of the year for taking my child to this basketball game.
Instagram versus reality.
Yeah. I should have posted the picture of the car seat. He rewards me with having to be outside in the garage at 25 degrees cleaning off this damn car seat because you have to take the whole thing apart. So I guess the free advice is never take your kids anywhere and always have a puke bag, I guess. Even though he wouldn't use it. He's two.
Oh, yeah. He'd have been like, hey, I need that bag. He'd wear it on his head while projectile vomiting over the back of the seat in front of him.
Yeah, probably so. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us here as we finish up with some wonderful and sterling vomit talk here at the end of our Monday episode, which was largely not vomit inducing, I think.
Yeah.
There's some good stuff in there as we discuss Nebraska basketball's win against Penn State, where they are with the early siege from the committee, and a little bit about what we want to learn from Nebraska football as we go through it this year. Kaleb, thank you so much for joining here on another edition of Unemployed with Mike Schaefer. Theo, thank you for driving the vote that is going on in Michael Severe's bracket. I think Theo has many accounts, and he is voting for Unemployed. It's probably the only reason we're up over Nebraska right now. So if we could just get to the second round, we have done it. Just like Nebraska basketball, we've set out with a big achievement. Anything after that is historic. So thank you, everybody. We'll be back Nebrasketball Tuesday. I've got my guests lined up. I really hope he shows up on time. I think you guys are going to love it. See you then.